is Freedom. Good afternoon. It's Breaking Free. And I'm so happy to have you. And I appreciate so much you're taking the time to be here with us. I know your time is precious. And the fact that you are choosing to spend this time with us matters a great deal to me. So thank you very much. I don't take it lightly. So I want to give you the most I can for this hour. And before we get started, I want to say hi to Amnon.
Hello.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
I'm just fine, thank you.
So Amnon is our producer, and I'm so happy always to be here with him and grateful that he has created this opportunity for me to come here each and every week to share something extraordinary. And I just want to say today I just went to the gynecologist's office with my daughter. I'm expecting my third grandson, and I got to see this ultrasound picture of him. And it's just amazing what technology can do. So I'm just very excited and bubbling over with joy. So I'd love to share that with you too. So we're going to get on with our show, and remember, you are more than welcome to communicate with us, connect with us in our chat. You can just put your name, nickname, whatever you like on the little line underneath the video, and just send it. And you can be part of the chat. We'd love to have you in there. All kinds of things go on in there. And then please feel free anytime during the show, if you have a question, a comment, you'd like to call in, you're welcome to do that. If you're by a phone, 919-518-9773, or you can Skype in with us on video, and that would be to computers, that's plural, the number 2K voice. So for wherever you are in the world, you can connect with us. And that is very important to me and to my guests always, because this is a forum, this is a safe space for you to come to and air whatever you want, ask the questions, get support, get advice, learn, grow, break free, feel inspired, all of those things. And today we're going to be talking about things that matter a great deal to me, and that's about relationships. And I am really into conflict. I love conflict because I love peace. And I believe that we can learn so much about each other when we don't run away from the things that hurt us or bother us or that we want to deny. And we have a friend on today, Susan Ornstein, who is a dear friend of mine who in the Raleigh-Cary area. She's a therapist. She works with couples, intimacy, relationships. And she is the go-to person to answer your questions, to get help, and to give us some insight into relationships and how to help them work, because that's what this life is all about. Whether it's a loved one, a stranger, it's all about relationship and how we relate to each other. So let me welcome Susan to our show. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Marilyn. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it so very much that you're bringing your wisdom here. So what do we mean by conflict, and how is and what and your work, I know you work with couples and family, so talk about conflict with us.
I think it basically means dealing with differences, and we're all different. If we all were just in relationships with our clones, then there'd be no purpose really. And it's those differences that push us to learn about ourselves and to explore and to grow. So I'm with you where I think conflict is actually a wonderful thing if we know how to embrace it instead of run from it.
Yeah, I wrote an article years ago about conflict being a spiritual tool in our toolbox.
Mm.
You know, I think it's an opportunity for us to take a look and realize that something needs addressing. And when we do, we feel this sense of freedom. So what are you seeing now? I mean, so you see couples, you see what? Talk about your practice and what you do.
So I have a counseling practice in Cary, and it's a full service practice. So we have therapists here who see kids and teens, but my specialty is adult relationships. And primarily I work with adults in couples in intimate relationships. But sometimes I'll see an adult daughter and adult mother or adult father. Or sometimes I'll see adults who are struggling with conflict with a supervisor or a neighbor or something like that. So conflict happens everywhere where we, unless we're a hermit and we're dealing with people, we're going to be exposed to differences.
Yeah, it's a part of everyday life.
It is.
So, how come for you, you chose conflict as the main theme in what you do?
Um, because that's why people come to me is they don't know how to address conflict and they want tools for communicating better. They instead of knowing how to address the issues that are facing them, they will either just fight or they'll withdraw and go to their separate corners. So, as a couples therapist and as a psychologist, it's really important that I know how to help people navigate conflict instead of avoiding it, helping people know how to get in and out of it comfortably. Um, so, one way I think of it is if you're learning how to drive and you learn how to get on the expressway, you better know where the off ramps are so that you feel like you know how to get on and you know how to get off. That's what I help people do in my office.
It's
So we don't
interesting.
avoid conflict, but we don't stay there and live there. We just kind of go in and go out.
That's an interesting way to put it,
Hmm.
because it's true. I think sometimes people they s- they don't know what to do with it, so they give up.
Hmm. Hmm.
And go ahead.
I agree. And then some people's relationship, their identity as a couple becomes that conflict,
Right,
uh, which is not
right.
how it needs to be either.
No, no, no. Is there a caller? Okay, we have a caller, which is
Oh,
great. Hello.
hooray!
Hooray, we love callers. Hello. Somebody there? Okay. Somebody there? If
You don't
you
get crank callers, do you, Marilyn?
say that again?
You don't get crank callers, do you?
Not usually.
I'm teasing.
No, no, no,
Oh,
not
whoever it
usually.
was, call back.
Call back, call back, call back. And if you haven't called yet and you want to, just burn up the line. Because this is important. I mean, if you have a question, if you're in a relationship and you'd like some, little bit of advice, if you want to learn about conflict, it can only help. Just like Susan said, I mean, there's conflict everywhere, whether it's colleagues, sons, daughters, it's all over. And it doesn't have to be the end all. And when you get through it, it takes you to a whole new level in that relationship, which can be beautiful.
Mhm.
So, Susan, when you mentioned intimacy, what does intimacy mean?
Well, people generally use intimacy, I find, as kind of a euphemism for sex. but but I think intimacy, sex in a sexual relationship, that's one type of intimacy. But if you broaden intimacy, I think it's about being real and being visible and showing up in your relationship with another person where there's trust and there's vulnerability. And of course, we're not going to want to do that with everybody. It's for a very selective, maybe one special person, or you might have a circle where you have people that you have different levels of intimacy with. But it's a precious resource, and intimacy requires being vulnerable.
So I loved what you said. So there are levels of intimacy,
Hmm.
and you have circles of people that are along those levels. Is
Yes.
is that what you would say?
Yes. And I think it coincides with trust. So, it wouldn't make sense to just say, okay, I'm going to become a more trusting person or I'm going to have more intimacy in my life and go up to somebody, a stranger, and tell them something deeply personal. Then you'd be putting yourself in a position where you really could get humiliated or taken advantage of. Um, so it takes some time to really read people and have shared experiences with them and see if they earn your trust and you earn their trust to allow your guard to come down and to be more and more real.
Do you think it's a good thing to feel or think that you like for I think on some level, like I would like to think on some level, that I'm a trusting person until something happens that I may not trust this person anymore, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm a trusting person to begin with. Now, I don't know if that's the case with a lot of people, but what would you say?
Um, that's a really interesting question. I'd like to think of myself as a trusting person, but I think I also want to be self-protective, so I don't want to give away my social security number to the next telemarketer that calls.
Right.
Um, So maybe what I would say is it's nice to give people the benefit of the doubt and proceed with caution. I think relationships develop over time and that trust builds slowly. That's why actually what we know about marriages, when couples know each other less than a year and they get married, their risk of divorce is higher. Because when I think when people rush into it and don't really vet each other, there's more of a risk. So yes, I love trust, but I think it has to be earned over time. There aren't shortcuts.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. Yeah, I often I've heard that the definition of trust is into me see.
Oh,
So obviously that you want to you have to be really comfortable with yourself
hmm,
to be intimate.
yes.
Is that true?
Yes, and you have to be really comfortable with the other person. And it's a beautiful thing because it's about, uh, I think what intimacy is about is mutual love with all our foibles and weaknesses and vulnerabilities. That's what makes it beautiful.
Mhm.
It's not just love. Love and intimacy aren't just for celebrities and super athletes and multimillionaires. Actually, that's not the case at all. You don't have to be beautiful or popular or particularly talented to have that love and intimacy. You just have to be trustworthy and really be present.
Mhm. So do you notice a theme today in general about couples and their and the things that um, they have conflict over? Is there certain things that are pretty like a theme running today, or just anything?
Well, I can answer that two ways.
Okay.
One is there's certain themes around content that come up all the time, and those are usually around time or messiness, kids, money, sex. So there's certain themes, but when you step back a little bit, really the overarching theme is, can I count on you? Do you love and respect me? Uh, and those are things people talk about, but what they're not talking about is that bigger those bigger issues that we get to in our counseling sessions,
Yeah,
the
it's a,
ones that are more intimate
yeah.
actually.
The ones that are more intimate. I mean, the people that are intimate, or the situations that are intimate.
Well, it's both. It's requiring people to be more vulnerable with each other and to actually voice that vulnerability. Like, hey, uh, when you didn't help me carry up that laundry basket, and I told you my foot hurt, that really hurt my feelings. That takes a level of vulnerability. So it's easier for people to kind of put their defenses on and their armor on and maybe make a sarcastic comment. Um, so
The
I
person
help.
expressing themselves making a sarcastic comment, or
Yes.
the uh-huh. Like what?
Yes.
Like for instance.
Like, are you going to help me here?
Uh-huh.
Um, and actually, a sarcastic comment might be more helpful than what I see some couples do, which would be instead of that sarcastic comment, they internalize that, gee, he didn't offer to help me, and then they create a story about it. He must not care about me. And then 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later, there's a theme with a lot of stories around that. Um, so that's really painful for people when they don't address things in an honest, open way where they can be vulnerable. And instead, they just build armor and they build resentment.
So that then it builds all that stuff that you don't say.
Yes.
So
And
it's
what I
go ahead.
find, yeah, I'm sorry,
No,
Marilyn, go
no,
ahead.
go ahead. I want you to talk.
What I find super fascinating about my work is I get to work with two people in a room, which I think is absolutely fascinating because I get to see different personalities, different combinations, how people interact. Um, but I don't care if you have the most confrontational, aggressive, hostile person or the most mild-mannered person. Um, there's just general theme of people not being able to really say what they need in a vulnerable way. It's just really fascinating to me.
So under that vulnerable container, would you put sarcasm?
Yeah. Yes, I think it's a way to avoid being real.
But it's better than not saying anything. You said.
I think at least the person will know.
Okay.
So it's not the best, but
But it's being hurt. But it's expressing your voice regardless. At least it's expressing. What about
Right.
anger?
It's a fine line because sometimes people can be so hurtful. I mean, I would never suggest people make personal attacks to other people. It leads to a lot of pain and a lot of scarring. But being able to express anger is super important.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so, for instance, if I were, I've been dancing before. I was at like a formal ball kind of thing, and I had these super high heels that were. I would never wear anything like that otherwise. They were very,
You were.
yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And they were super sharp, and I had this older man who wanted to guide me, so he said, let's dance, and I felt like he was totally guiding me all over the room. I felt totally out of control. He was in control, and I backed into a woman who, who also had on open feet shoes, and my heel dug into her flesh. It was the most traumatic experience. um,
Ooh,
and she said ow, and I felt horrible, but holy cow, I'm just thinking, thank goodness she said ow. What if I kept doing that? We
right.
need to have people signal when we're hurting them so we can get off their foot immediately. um,
So
so
give us some
yeah.
pointers of, and I mean, there's so many things I want to talk to you here because I love these kinds of conversations. So
Hmm.
I love them, and I'm sure there are people out there that love them too. And if you do, and I'm not asking the question you want me to ask, call in and be vulnerable. Call in, give us your question, 919-518-9773, or Skype with us at Computers 2K Voice, or ask the question on the chat and we'll pick it up. So, some pointers like in relationships. What are some of the things that, and I know situation to situation might vary, but give us some pointers of some things that we might not think about before we get to you.
Hmm. So I think to be able to risk saying ouch to somebody, that's sort of the metaphor I use with the dancing. But um, ooh, yikes! Did you mean to say it that harshly? Or oops, or wow, that was intense. I don't know if you meant to hurt my feelings. So to be able to let somebody know when they step on your toes is so crucial. And then they get the chance to say, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," or "Oh, I'm sorry. What was I thinking?"
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that opportunity for repair, which is really the foundation for a great relationship, an ability to clean things up when you screw up, because we're all just trying to figure it out. We're all imperfect.
We're all imperfect. And I read a book years ago by a woman, and the book was called Broken Open. And you have to be vulnerable, which can hurt. And
Hmm.
you can, but like an egg, you have to break it to be open sometimes, to get more open, to be freer. You've got to come from something that may not be so freeing, or
Hmm.
or you start off not so free. Um, it's very interesting because she said we're all bozos on the bus. We're all
Mm.
learning, and I think that's why I love doing the show because I don't. I sit back sometimes and I'll say, like last night, I had some words with my husband, and I thought afterwards, and I thought it's perfect because the universe gave me this situation because of course Susan's coming on the show tomorrow, and I get to have something personal to share. I could have
That's right.
done, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could do without it, but it happened, and so he worked yesterday. He came home, and he we were going to have something very light for dinner because we had a big brunch, and so fruit and yogurt and stuff like that, and we didn't have all the fruit that he wanted. So he wanted to go to the grocery store. So I said, okay. And I say, okay, great, go. But could you get me some almonds, slivered almonds, because I like that in my yogurt, and I didn't have much. So when anyway, he called from the grocery store about getting a grapefruit. And I said, I don't eat grapefruit. It's too much acid, but doesn't mean you can't buy it. Well, he came home without the almonds and thinking I'm going to eat this grapefruit. And I'm like, you didn't, the one thing I asked him for, he didn't bring home, which I know you've all heard these things before, and did not have any clue about the conversation I had with him about the grapefruit. And I was like, where were you? And
Huh.
and he was on the phone, but he was so, I think he was so like wanting to please me on tried too hard to please me on some level, that he was so concentrating on everything that was around him, like, would I want this or should I get this? He didn't even hear the conversation.
Interesting. Yeah.
But I had to look really, really deep into this thing, not just take it the face value, like, you know, and I was not happy last night, and I wasn't happy this morning. And it's taken me work to look deeper and deeper into what went on, and to want him to acknowledge what he did, because not just so I no, I don't want to be right. I want it different for the next time. And if he doesn't acknowledge it now, then he won't pay enough attention for it to be different.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah, I I think you got the steps right. We want to be acknowledged. It's not so much about rubbing somebody's nose in it, but it's about, do you care? Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you feel me? Do you? So that makes absolute sense.
And it is
And
a process, right, Susan? Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
it is a process.
Go
It
ahead.
is, and it's interesting you talked about the phone, because so many of my couples get into arguments. Well, that's not exactly what you were talking about. You didn't get an argument over the phone, so I'm going on a little detour.
That's
But
okay.
a lot of my couples talk about arguments they have over text or the phone, or just missing each other, sort of missing. I don't mean missing like longing for each other. I mean missing like miscommunicating with each other, because text and email and phone are not the same as being in the same room, eye to eye, seeing the body language, really being present. It just makes it so much harder.
Mhm. That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Is to be very careful of those texts.
Mm-hmm.
They are dangerous in
Yes.
relationships.
And I feel like I'm cheating sometimes as a couples therapist, because I will have couples do reenactments of their conflict. So we get to do like a little skit sometimes, and they'll show me where it went wrong, because people sometimes just talking about it miss it, but if you're acting it out, some things come to light. And sometimes it's just as simple as they were looking down texting, and it's that easy of a fix. So I feel like I'm cheating sometimes, because that's pretty easy to to figure out.
Yeah, but it's important what you're saying, because when we're in it with someone, and it could be our loved one, our intimate loved one, it could be our children, whoever it is. I think it's important for somebody to ask the questions that you ask.
Mm-hmm.
So that the things that we don't overlook that we take so for granted could be the thing that caused the whole thing to go, and we didn't even realize it.
That's
Right.
right. So in my sessions, it's almost like 3D. The work comes to life, and I can see nuances, and people can see nuances in their expression and body language, which makes it really fun.
Especially those things that somebody could turn around and say, well, she does that all the time, or he does that all the time, and like, I take it for granted, but it bothers me all the time. Those are kinds of things we want to look for. Chris has a question out on the chat, and what is the most important question you can ask your spouse every day to show you care?
I don't think there would be one question, but I think the general theme would be, how are you doing? How are things going? Let me know you. What's going on in your life? What are you excited about for today? What are you stressed about for today? What are you worried about? Just to make sure you're updating your information about your partner, just like people read the newspaper every day, or even if you don't read the newspaper every day, it's more important to read your partner every day.
And to listen to the answer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is so important.
Great question.
Yeah. I mean,
like questions.
Okay, good. I got another, I got a statement here, but we could turn it into a question.
Okay.
Listen to the answers, because if you ask the question and you don't listen to the answer, that's going to infuse even more anger, you know, and then to at least be able to have a comeback question after you get an answer shows you really care and that you're
Mhm.
really connected. And a few minute connection is better than no connection, so make every connection matter. um,
Well
Here's
put.
well put.
Yes.
Speaking from experience.
Yeah, we all have to practice this.
Yeah, really. So we have somebody that's just called in. Hello.
No, I
Oh,
can't put that person up because that person on the phone first needs to turn down their
okay. They're
sound on the
yeah,
computer.
so otherwise we'll be hearing it vibrate. So when you call in, and please just turn your sound down on your computer so we don't hear the vibration. So is this person still on?
That person hung up.
Okay.
I guess
So turn it down and then call us back. All right, here is Barbie. Sometimes I feel I'm taken for granted by my husband. If I bring that up, he changes short term, but then I get mad that he's only being attentive because I told him to be. Sort of a no-win situation. What do you think?
I hear that a lot. Um, I actually think it's okay and helpful to coach your partner constantly on what you want and let them coach you on what they want. And so I hear what Barbie's saying, that it's frustrating, but there's another way to look at it, and that is that when your partner changes because you tell them something's important, they really are listening. And one way to look at it is they just might need constant reminders. I guess the challenge for all of us is, how do we remind our partner? How do we encourage our partner to be loving and sweet and doting and caring? How do we do that? So we don't want to be in a position of threats or nagging or complaining. That's not fun for us, and that's not fun for our partner. But do we know how to attract our partner to get attention? Do we know how to do a little flirting or playfulness, or hugging them, and creating the mood? So that could be fun. Um, it's okay to initiate things, and when you get it back, that's you're still getting it. I wouldn't get hung up on who's initiating, but a lot of people dismiss that.
So I want to ask you about flirting, but I want to say it takes one person to lead.
Hmm.
So whoever is the person leading at the time, it's okay because it just takes, even in the dance, you can't both
Hmm.
be leading at this simultaneously. It takes one person to lead. The other
Hmm.
thing is, I would say, Barbie, that when your husband, because I do this too, obviously, when your husband is doing it right, let them know. Or if it's your wife or your significant other, whoever it is, whatever relationship you're in, when they are practicing, because that's what it is. Practice makes perfect, and sometimes people don't know what to do. They don't know the right word. They don't know the action to take. Whatever it is, let them know that they're doing it right. And if you and the flirting and the sharing in those moments will, I mean, will help it last longer, and so that they know it's embedded in them that this was the positive reinforcement. They got it in this moment, that it's a good thing. So let it be known that it is a win-win, actually. So you said flirting, so I can't. We have to go to flirting and intimacy, really, and sex, because that's important and all
Right.
of that. So talk about flirting. Like how, what is flirting really anyway?
It's really playfulness. And I like what you said, Marilyn, about, I can't remember exactly, even though it was 5 seconds ago, what you said, but something about it made me think that we're all raised in different families, and in some people's families, they're not showered with attention, and people are not as expressive. And so uh, sometimes, like I think you were saying, she could coach her husband
Yeah,
or offer positive reinforcement, because it might not be natural.
right.
It's not natural for a lot of people to be expressive if they didn't grow up in a home where people were very expressive. Um, and back to flirting, I think flirting is being playful. And I mean, we see dogs being playful, we see little kids being playful, but it's about being more lighthearted and reaching out to people and showing them that you think they're attractive, not just physically attractive or not necessarily physically attractive, but attractive and desirable.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And it feels good. I mean,
Hmm.
it feels good to flirt, even with yourself,
Hmm.
right?
It
Um,
does.
so let's see. I want to talk about what's going on now. I mean, we're going to keep talking about relationships, and I'm happy to talk about any kind of relationships, not just husbands and wives, but any kind of relationship that you're in. If it's a colleague, a partner of any kind, I think that there's so much to learn from each other, and the same things almost hold true in the husband wife intimate partner relationships that do hold true in with colleagues as well. It's that vulnerability. It's in letting somebody see your oops, I call them, you know
Hmm.
because we all have like oops, we all make lessons happen, every day, and it feels really good not to have to cover them up, because we all have them and we learn from each other's oops as well as from our successes. So I think it's really vital. But I want to ask you about what's gone on in the with what happened with the Supreme Court and gay, lesbian, marriages. What are you thinking about that?
I was overjoyed. I was really delighted that people, two adults, consenting adults who want to have an intimate relationship and they want it to be valued and have the dignity of being together and raising a family if they choose to do that, is now legal. I just celebrate that. I think
Hmm.
it's lovely.
Hmm. Yeah, I do too. I think it's wonderful, and I'm glad that we are forward going in that direction, because a couple of years ago, we actually did a show when it wasn't things were not passing in North Carolina, and there was a whole bunch of things going on, and we
Hmm.
did a show about love and who can tell you, who you can love anyway. So I'm happy about that. And just in your opinion, um, as far as couples and
Hmm.
intimate relationships in bringing up families, is there? I mean, love is love when you're bringing up a family.
Yes, and I think it's really interesting and mind-boggling at times how many times I will have heterosexual couples and they will define their relationship problems as that's because he's a man and that's because I'm a woman. But I will tell you, gay couples will have just as much marital difficulties as anybody else. And it's just because two people are coming together with conflict, with differences. Um, but uh, I don't think they'll be any different than anybody else's. They will still be about, are you there for me? Can I count on you? Can I make sure that you're going to put me first? Are we going to confide in each other? Are we available for each other? Do we make time for each other? Those are the same issues that anyone in an intimate relationship is facing.
Yeah, we want to belong,
Hmm.
and know, it's a great feeling to belong and know that you've arrived or you're home with someone, and you can
Hmm. It's a real,
share.
yes,
Yeah, what were you going to say?
absolutely. It's a real anchor.
Hmm.
I think we get a sense of security knowing that there's somebody there for us and that we have a life partner. And I know that that translates into improved physical health and an improved emotional health. So, for example, when somebody's struggling with depression, but they know they have a partner that really understands, they're going to heal quicker. Same with other kind of illnesses. And I think their children will be more secure and more stable knowing that mom and dad or mom and mom or dad or dad
Yeah.
have each other's back. And so instead of, oh, we're going to badmouth each other or we're going to we're going we're going to hurt each other, we're going to protect each other, and that makes the kids safe.
Hmm.
So the kids can be kids, the kids don't have
Right.
to be little miniature parents, which
Right.
happens sometimes when couples aren't really turning to each other. Then I think the roles get all mixed up and the kids get confused. And there's more of a chance of all kind of emotional difficulties.
So that's more of the issue than it being a woman with a woman or a man with a man. It's really about just belonging. I
Hmm.
mean, that makes a happy home. Not whether you're, two women or two men or heterosexual or whatever. It's just a belonging and how people communicate with each other.
Yes.
And also in the world today, and how things are in the world today, how important is it to have these kinds of relationships? How important is it for people to be connected?
That's a great question, and I just heard a TED talk on the radio yesterday, and I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the person doing it, but they were talking about how they're creating robots for elderly people in nursing homes. They created some kind of robot and they put fur on it to make it seem like a stuffed animal or a seal, and they gave the robot vocalization. So these people in all senior centers who might be or tend to be very, very lonely could turn to those robots for comfort. And the person doing the TED talk was bemoaning that we don't have each other to listen to each other's stories and to offer comfort. So I think with social media and Facebook and the Twitter, all these kind of things, it's an illusion of connection. We're always connected. We always have our phone. We always have our Facebook, but it's not the real intimacy that you can get when it's one to one. And that is an authentic relationship that really can give you that sense of security and that sense of emotional health that Facebook will never match.
Mhm. Yeah. But then I guess also for some people, you know, who are who have a very difficult time being vulnerable. It is it just like there are levels of intimacy. I maybe it is on a level of intimacy that some people just wouldn't even have.
It could be. I mean, I've heard, I haven't dug too deep, but I have heard that people who are prone to depression get more depressed looking at Facebook because people
Mhm.
tend to post the
Uh,
glamour shots, the time at the beach, the time with friends, and it's not real. So I think if you are prone to feeling lonely or depressed, Facebook might make it worse. That's.
right. That's a good point. Very good
Mhm.
point. Once again, I want to just remind you all that you are welcome to call in. We've had somebody call, but they hung up. But please call again.
Call back.
Yeah, 919-518-9773, or you can Skype with us at computers, that's plural, the number 2K voice. Just shut your computer volume off so we're not kind of hearing that voice back and forth. So here's another question. Chris is very brave. So those of you on the chat, if you've got a question, please ask. And it doesn't have to be about a significant other, a husband, a wife, a partner. It could be about a family member that you have a question about. Because there are some things, I mean, obviously, a lot of what we're talking about holds true regardless of who you're referring to. If somebody's hurt your feelings, they've hurt your feelings. And it's the same things you say to someone regardless of who they are. So Chris is asking, she's read that it's better to let's see, it's better for parents to disagree and work toward resolution in front of their children than to do it behind closed doors because it models conflict resolution for the children. What's your opinion of this philosophy?
Uh, I agree almost wholeheartedly. The only exception would be I would want to make sure that the parents keep the conflict in bounds and there's no dirty fighting.
Mhm.
So I think it's the worst if kids see their parents with name calling or any kind of threats or any kind of hostility. I think that is absolutely very detrimental to kids. But being able to disagree and express opinions and work it out, I think, is a great model for kids. So many including myself, but it seems like when I ask questions to any of my clients, it's pretty similar that they didn't really have a working model of how to deal with the conflict, that their parents would, like you said, go in another room and work it out. So, yeah, it'd be a great life lesson to be able to do that in front of your kids. Very good point.
Can people do that? Do people do that? People that work
Can
with you do that, right?
can people work things out?
Yeah. No, do they generally um, work them out in front of their kids? I think that would be great.
I don't think it's the norm, no.
Uh-huh. It sounds like it would be a wonderful thing to do for anybody to be able to do that.
Hmm.
And,
And to
and
be able to say, and to model in front of your kids, um, with your husband or your spouse, hey, you're right, I didn't think about that, or oh, I'm sorry.
mhm,
Those are great things to model. If both spouses can do that and it's mutual, you don't want one, of course you wouldn't want one person always to be giving in, but if they can see both partners giving in at times and accommodating, I think that's lovely.
mhm. Sometimes it can make you be more accommodating to give you that container, that constriction. If you
Little
know.
eyes watching.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Uh, so, are you fun? So, I wanted to ask you about kids in general. So, you see parents with their children as well, right? So, mothers and their daughters, or who?
So in my personal practice, I only work with adults. I can work around parenting issues, but I don't work with children. But there are other people in my practice who specifically have training and expertise doing child therapy and play therapy and things like that. So my real focus when I do couples work is on helping the couple you know, be stable, be there for each other, be a united front, be able to make mutual decisions, be able to collaborate. That's what I do.
So, I guess part of collaborating is being able to admit when you are wrong,
Mm-hmm.
when somebody else is right.
Mm-hmm. Compromise.
Compromise. What do you do about blame?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, sometimes when people are blaming, they're actually talking about a hurt they had and they're expressing their anger or frustration. And that gives the other person the opportunity to say, oh, okay, I didn't realize that was bothering you. And then they can do repair.
Mhm.
Um,
Have you ever
if
listened to Renee Brown?
Yes,
Renee Brown.
yes,
Yeah, what,
yeah,
I mean, because she
love
does it. Love her? You love her.
love her.
Can you
Totally.
explain to people who she is? Because I'm sure you could do it better than I can.
Ah, okay. I'll give him a
Or
shot.
what her premise is.
Yes, she is a shame researcher. So I think she has a doctorate in social work, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
And she got very interested in studying what creates shame. And I think she's just been looking at this for many, many years. And what she's found is that there's kind of the flip side of shame, which is vulnerability. And that so let me see if I can explain it. Let's say we are vulnerable and somebody lets us down. They can't be there for us. They can't validate us, and we feel exposed, and that's what shame is. But the opposite is when we're vulnerable. Let's say as a child, we're vulnerable, we're needy, we're helpless, and there's somebody there who can embrace us, comfort us, acknowledge us, and that's actually a way to build trust and connection. So Brene Brown talks about how we build connection and intimacy when we find trustworthy people and are vulnerable with them. And I love her work. I think she's done an amazing job describing this emotion that I don't know is very well understood. So I definitely recommend checking her online. She has YouTube videos, podcasts. She has a book called The Gift of Imperfection. Um, yeah, great resource.
So, what would you say, based on what you know, what you've learned, and what you deal with about shame, blame?
Shame, blame. Um, the challenge for people in relationship is how to get the other person to understand you and to want to understand you out of love and a mutual kind of caring and a mutual sense of fairness, not because you're threatening them or nagging them or giving them a guilt trip or blaming them or putting shame on them. So that might work temporarily. You might be able to get a partner to stay with you for a while because of some kind of guilt or threat, but there's just no way to have a healthy, strong relationship unless there's that understanding and more of an attraction instead of the blame and shame.
Yeah, I think it's a bad place to go.
Mm-hmm.
That blame and shame, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to take anybody anywhere, but it's really going to hurt so much more than anything can possibly hurt. But the problem is a lot of people don't need anybody to shame them or blame them. They feel it all on their own.
Mm. That's a great point. That's absolutely right.
So they come into it. I mean, we can be vicious with someone, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when we're just fighting for survival, we can blame, we can shame somebody else into something. But what we do to ourselves in shaming and blaming isn't
Mm-hmm.
any better.
Mm-hmm. That's a actually really good point. And when I do couples work, I think one of the things I work on with couples is knowing your partner, knowing what is the baggage they come with, what are their triggers, what have been their biggest disappointments, what kind of things make them vulnerable, and instead of using that against them, how can you recognize when they're triggered, when they're anxious, when they're vulnerable, and comfort them. And that's a way to do some of that healing because we come to relationships with baggage, with lots of um, disappointing
Yeah,
relationship
man, if
history.
you've lived a life, you're going to come with something. I mean, you can't come into a relationship with nothing,
I
right?
agree. Right.
Especially, I mean, what about people who, I mean, starting second marriages, third marriages, whatever it is? I mean, how do you speak to them about relationship?
Right. Well, I think people have to accept that you are marrying not only your husband, but his ex-wife and his kids from this marriage and his girlfriend and his mother and it all you get all of it and you um, and that it's important to be sensitive to all the issues that people come with. They can't erase them. Even if they tried, they couldn't erase them.
So if you love, not if, but when you love someone, you're going to love everything. I mean, hopefully, you're going to love a lot of things about them, right? You're going to love more about them than you're. I mean, well, maybe that's not the right thing. You can love them, and maybe there's some things you don't like. Is that a better way to say it, Susan?
Yes.
Or how would you
I
say it?
Yeah, I think it helps us to be compassionate when people may be seemingly irrational if we understand where their pain comes from or their vulnerability comes from. Uh, then we can have a context and be more compassionate
Mm-hmm.
because in case anybody listening doesn't know this, none of us are rational. It's just none of us. It's true.
mm, it's
There was a even in economics, they used to study economics as a science with, that people will make rational economic decisions, not only personally, but as governments. And then they came up with a whole field called behavioral economics. I think Dan Ariely is one of, a professor at Duke who talks about this, but that people don't make rational decisions. They don't just look at numbers and do a spreadsheet, that they're emotions that we don't even recognize that come into everything. And especially with relationships, there's a lot of time where we're on automatic pilot and we're doing things that are completely irrational.
mm.
So,
So relationships is an action. It doesn't happen by itself.
that's right.
It's a constant tweaking, being vigilant, checking in, working on. You cannot put it on autopilot and think it's gonna be great and it's gonna fly.
No,
Yeah.
correct.
So I want to just go ahead, Susan. Go ahead.
You have to be awake. I mean, I'm just thinking, back to the dancing analogy. If you're in a crowded dance floor and you're falling, you're asleep or in a coma, it's not going to work. You have to keep your eyes open. You have to listen. You have to feel. You have to get the feedback from your environment. And that metaphor goes with lots of things: driving, just living. We can't be zombies and have healthy relationships.
So what would you say to people who have been in a relationship and then they're angry with each other and they stop talking? Whether it is a husband, wife, partner, I see it very often with family members where people stop talking. And then it gets worse and worse, and then it's a day, it's a week, it's a month, it's a year. What do you say to that?
I say, you do yourself a favor and get some help as quickly as you can. So I love couples counseling and family counseling because you have a neutral party who's not involved, who doesn't have a dog in the fight to facilitate a conversation and to coach and give feedback. And at the end of the day, isn't going to tell anybody your business, isn't going to take sides. I think that's really important. So I'd suggest going to a family therapist, a couples therapist. There are mediators. There are a lot of people that are trained and have the disposition to help people through conflict, to manage conflict.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And I want to say, I'm going to ask Susan to come back again, and I hope she will, because this has been one of the fastest hours I think we've ever had. I mean, there's so much to talk about relationships. But, those of you that have watched us before know that I am in the process of writing books about conflict and creating peace and relationships and all of that stuff. So if you have a personal story that you're willing to share, I would love it if you would write it, and we'll edit it and send it back to you and all of that stuff. But if you're willing to be in one of these books, because every relationship, I would love to have a book about every possible conceivable relationship there is, because I feel like we can learn from each other's oops, as well as all the I call them toots and oops, tooting our horn and oopsing. So if you are, please write to me at MarilynShannon.com, and we can talk about it and all of that. And we've talked some about listening, because it's so important to listen to someone. And when you're and asking the right questions is vital. And I have a free complimentary, it's called the Listening Manifesto, on my website at MarilynShannon.com, which will take you through all avenues of listening, which if you really approach listening from well, you can't approach it anyway but open, because as you do, it takes you deeper and deeper, and it makes it a lot easier in relationships to listen when you surrender. So, and it takes listening to surrender. So, take advantage of those things. It's really important. So, Susan, when somebody looks for you, what will they find, and where will they find you? And a little promotion now would be good.
Yes, thank you. I have a website. It's www.orensteinsolutions.com. And if people want to get some information, we have a free online e-newsletter where we will have book reviews, movie reviews, information about research related to mental health and relationships, relationship tips, all kinds of things. So feel free to join that newsletter. We also have some online quizzes you can take to see about your emotional health and the health of your relationships. So the website's one way. You can also call, and I will be glad to connect you to anyone in our practice, depending on what you're looking for. And I'll always be glad to offer a free consultation to see if we're a match, and I can give you what you're looking for. But I love working with relationships. It means a lot to me. I really value the work I get to do. It's an honor, and it's an honor to be on the show today, Marilyn. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, Susan, thanks for being here. It's been fabulous. And we have a question on the chat, which is a really good one, and it's from Jay. Is it ever too late with a relationship that's in trouble? Is it ever too late?
It could be, but you never know on the surface of it. I've seen things that surprise me, so you just don't know. So sometimes people will be pretty stubborn and say they're done, but then they come into couples counseling and they open up and they can make changes.
Hmm.
So I'd say I don't know what that would look like to know for sure.
Yeah, Jay added that the relationship is 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm. I've worked with people with relationships 20 years, 30 years, and they have been able to turn things around. So I wouldn't let that stop me.
No, I would certainly agree, and I would add that sometimes, as we said during the show, sometimes you can be too close to something, and you can't see the leak. You can't see that common thing that is just a tweak that's gone wrong. So I would, if 20 years is any relationship, well, I don't care whether it's a new relationship or a 20 plus year relationship, it's important. You know, it's important that we stay as connected as we possibly can if we can. So I would suggest seeing someone because anything is possible. And if there is buy-in from both parties in the relationship, that you're ahead of the game. You know, if one person wants to work on something and somebody else doesn't, what do you say, Susan?
I'd say if that person's willing to come to couples counseling, if that partner who said they're done, then there may be some hope. There may be, even if it's just that 1%. On the other hand, if they absolutely don't want to come, I would definitely say don't threaten them, guilt trip them. It has to be somebody's free will to come in. You wouldn't want to hire somebody to drag somebody into my office.
Right.
But I've seen that the partner who's not so interested in coming can come into counseling and see that it's a safe environment and they're going to be heard, and all kinds of possibilities open up.
Yeah, it's amazing what's possible. And I would also say, I would also add that if you are in a relationship where one wants to go and one doesn't, but the one that doesn't want to go goes anyway, not under distress like Susan's saying, not by making them, but they do go anyway, there's a glimmer. There's a glimmer of of hope. And anytime you have that, a possibility of that, there's something to work on, you know. And you just, it's important. So I would, and there's nothing impossible. And as far as abuse, we didn't talk about domestic violence or any kind of abuse, but can you add something about that?
Well, you have to be safe. So if anybody felt like they're physically in danger, then absolutely make sure you're safe. And couples counseling isn't the place to be. If you feel like your partner has qualities of being violent, maybe even antisocial, and can't participate and have empathy, then and you're in danger, by all means protect yourself. On the other hand, in a lot of relationships, both partners hurt each other. There's emotional and verbal abuse. They traumatize each other, not intentionally, but just because people are so hurt that they're hurting each other. And in those cases, I've seen that things absolutely can turn around.
And when we're young, we start off a certain way, and people change, people grow, people take on new things. It doesn't mean that, sometimes some people leave somebody in the dust. It doesn't mean the person in the dust can't catch up a little bit or wants to catch up. And two people don't have to be at the same place for them to get along, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
in closing, because it's past the time but in closing, Susan, what words of wisdom would you share?
Well, I would just share my appreciation for people listening in and participating by listening, by sending questions, by calling. You obviously value relationships, and I think you're right on, because I think that's what makes our life worth living. That's what makes us human, and I think love can elevate all of us. So I appreciate everybody tuning in today.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you being here too. And I'm looking for people who would be interested, who have a product or service that they want to market. Our shows are doing really well throughout Nissan Communications. We have lots of things to share and ways of marketing products, services, books, ideas, whatever it is, philosophies. Let me know at Marilyn at MarilynShannon.com, and I'll help get you situated. So, Susan, it's been a pleasure.
You too, Marilyn. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you all out there for being here today. It's been an honor to have you, all the people in the chat. Please come back again each week that you can. And the shows are going to on YouTube, so look for us there if you want to go back, because sometimes you're in it and you don't hear all the valuable information, so you want to go back and listen again, and they're there. So under Reenchanter. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful week, and I will see you all next week. Bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCBVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Your Healthy Pet with Gisela DiCarlo. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.